I thought I'd talk a little bit today about the idea of remembering and reminding, being reminded. Remembering, obviously, is the ability to have a memory, to remember our life is clearly something that's important to all of us. And we're constantly reminding ourselves of our inner past. I'm going to talk more from from an enlightened standpoint and from kind of an unenlightened standpoint of memory and remembering and being reminded. Shelley is listening to this audiobook by this doctor, African American female doctor, and talks about race and all this stuff, and the current divide of what we have created over the years in the United States and frankly around the world, this inequality that has been created. And then we have this thing called COVID. And to me, COVID is this thing that's just freezing us in time, holding us here. Don't move. Listen to yourself. Listen to yourself and feel yourself, and to start to realize a deeper truth for humanity and for yourself. And so COVID to me is nothing more than this thing to freeze us, to stay put, like we're all frozen right now, not knowing what to do, where to go. And yet we have a lot of people who are racing to try to unfreeze us. But this has a thing about it that needs to freeze us in the moment, so that the memory that we look at, the remembrance that we have in ourselves, the memories that we have in ourselves can be looked at. So we're looking at ourselves. This book, where Shelley was telling me this morning about this story where she goes in trying to get this position, highly qualified, should get the job, and then she doesn't get it because of her looks and all that. We know that stuff. And she walks into this guy who is the head of the, I don't know if the head of the hospitals, or he is telling her that I've been trying to change the culture of this place for decades. And she's listening, Great, that sounds fantastic, right? Doesn't that sound really like, okay, this is really, really cool that, this guy has been trying to do that. And then she walks out the door and she says to herself, yes, that is great, but you'll just forget about it and go on your merry way, where I'm constantly reminded every moment of who I am. And you can let it go. So the enlightened side of that is to feel that other person completely and realize that they're experiencing this every moment, and to take that in. And if you can take that in, all of a sudden, it's not about what you've done. And then you let it go. And you forget about it. So the remembrance is strong in her about what has happened over the long time. We have the same thing in our own lives, in a different sort of way. We try to change. We come here to meditate, to kind of find something in us that's going to allow us to change something in us that we just want to free ourselves of. Whatever that is. It could be some remembrance you had as a child or as an adult, and you want to free yourself from it. I mean, memory is fantastic, but it gets in the way because it holds us in that place. And so what do? We meditate to try to let some of this go. And yet, our friends, our family, society keeps us reminded of who we are. constantly. So we're in the same boat, really, as the doctor, being reminded of who we are. And then we get caught in that. And it's very difficult to let go of other people trying to keep us reminded of who we are. I'm an engineer. Yeah, you're reminded of as an engineer. Yeah, but I'm a lot of other things. Yeah, but you're reminded yourself as an engineer. That's how you're being constantly seen. And it's very difficult to break that. So what do? We sit here and we try to free that for a moment. And then it gobbled back up into the whole thing. That's why this Kobat is so brilliant, because it's freeing us, it's freezing us to stay in this place longer. As humanity, if we saw it like that, we would shift quickly. But we move slowly. This guy said he's been trying to change the culture for decades. So that's slow. And she's like, I want this now. I don't want to be reminded of this any longer. So they go their merry way. And this one suffers, and this one suffers not quite the same. Because it's not being reminded. So there's a power of being reminded and seeing what it is that's being reminded in yourself. And hear it. But it takes a strong person to go beyond that. An enlightened person sees that and frees themselves of all being reminded of. Let the others remind themselves of who they think you are. My mother's suffered for a long, long time. She remembered growing up and imagining that she'd get married and have kids and it'd be just, perfect. She had kids, 5 of us. And yet, my father left when I was 19, and my mother crumbled into what she remembered wasn't what was happening. And she suffered. She suffered for the rest of her life. She was only 51 or 2, and that was it. In this kind of depressive state for a long time. So she was constantly reminding herself of what her past was supposed to be like, her memory of what she wanted, and it didn't arise. And then constantly reminding herself that that didn't happen, and it made her in that depressed place constantly. What's interesting was my mother started getting dementia in her late 70s. And she smoked for years. Not a lot, but it's enough. And, it was like one of these things where we wish she didn't smoke, but she smoked. But then there was a point where the memory starts to get to a point. The remembrance of her smoking, one day we took her cigarettes from her and she completely forgot she smoked. And I remember telling my mom, hey, Mom, wow, when'd you stop smoking? Oh, I stopped smoking years ago. Even though it was days. So the memory of this reality slipped away. So it shows you that this memory thing, to live in this memory space, is very dicey, because as soon as it starts to fade away, something else arises. The beautiful thing about this for me with my mom was when she started to lose that part of her remembrance, she started to open up. Her anger with my father started to fade away in her. Now, I had already had this awakening, so I saw what was going on. My siblings did not see. All they saw was being reminded that my mom was suffering and was losing her memory. So that's how they saw it. They were being reminded that she was losing her memory. I'm seeing it that she's opening up and letting go and opening up even more. She starts becoming like a muse to me because she starts to free herself into the place that she really was the whole time. That the memory was clouding who she was. And so for about 4 years, I had the most amazing time with my mom. It was so free. Whatever was perfect for her. And we'd had these deep conversations. And it was like all this stuff that she was holding on to crumbled away, gone. And it opened up this whole place in her. But it took that to do that. Awakening or enlightenment is seeing it now so that you do free yourself and not, you can still have a memory. Like I still have a memory, but I'm not caught in the memory. I can see it all. I can see what's going on in my past. And I can see when people are trying to hold me in my past, especially my siblings. They want to hold me, in that remembrance of who I was. There's a power in letting go. I mean, that's this meditation, is trying to let go in something. There's a much more powerful part of us that doesn't get caught in our memory. And it's new again. Like I said early, this moment is completely new. And Kobat is teaching us that truth. Whether we learn it or not, I don't know. Some of us are. Some of us are having transformational moments right now. As I always tell Shelley, I said the whole thing that's going on with the race relationship is being so intensified because we're freezing ourselves in time and we don't have time to do other things. So we're pushing ourselves deeper into it. We're actually feeling the other person. We're understanding that, like the doctor, we understood the problem, but we didn't feel it every moment. We weren't reminded every moment. We're not even reminded of who we are in the sense of what we really, really, really are here for. To exist with each other, in each other, not separate of each other, but in each other. And when you're in each other, then there is no letting go and walking in different directions. There's a much more powerful inner connection. And I just sense that that's some level what's arising right now. So I know people are suffering and people are dying in this COVID, but people are suffering and dying also in what's going on a day-to-day basis. Being reminded of who we are, and we do that to others. We're constantly doing that to others too. Be aware of that. We don't even mean to, but it just kind of happens, right? It just kind of happens. And we lose track of this moment as so completely new. It doesn't hold any of this stuff, by the way. This moment holds nothing. It holds none of this. We hold it as a memory. And then we get stuck in it. And we never get anywhere from it. We just don't seem to, because we're so busy with our own existence. We're being reminded of our own existence, and we're trying to stay in that own existence of, oh, we're this, and we're this, and we're this, and we're this, and we have to do this, and this, and this based on my memory, based on who I think I am. And then you lose track. But what's going on right now, where we're sharing this experience together, is one that is incredibly beautiful, really. It looks painful, but actually, it needs that kind of pain, that kind of force to free us. Force in the self frees us from our own stuff. If we don't have that, it doesn't really move. It moves out, in and out quickly. This has to stay. This cannot go. Like the doctor who said, I am reminded constantly. You are constantly reminding yourself. And this work here, to free yourself, to awaken yourself from it, is really an incredibly beautiful process, actually. So that when you're in the moment, you can feel others as well as a broader scale of who you really are and who I am, who we all are with each other. Here I am in America with my face mask, and I'm watching Formula One, and they're with face masks in Austria. Great, we're sharing a moment. Fantastic. So memory is a gift, but it's also problematic. As my mom found out, memory can suffer. And there's a reason why we have some suffering in it. And if we use it in the right way, where we're meditating, we're sitting with ourselves and letting that suffering kind of come up through this, where we create some space and that energy, that force that comes in, the suffering of memory comes in, but you have some space here and it comes in through that space, then it opens up new portals in you. That's when it gets reset from suffering to an awakening. All suffering is just it hasn't been awoken yet. That's the only difference between suffering and not suffering. And so you take the force that's going on, create some space like we do, you meditate, and open ourselves up through that force, and it gets realized. And then you'll feel much deeper others. That's the thing. You'll feel much deeper others. Much more intimate. And then you're not waiting for someone else to get there, to them do it. Them get there. Forget that. You get there. We get there. Then it changes the course of humanity into this place of love, which is where it's supposed to be, which is what it is. So I'll leave you with this. When I had the awakening, I remember looking at a banana, and I said, "Wow, I have never eaten you before. I've never eaten a banana before. I've never eaten you before." And that changed completely the moment, because before I'd eat this and like, okay, it's just a banana, another banana, another thing. But when you start to awaken, this banana becomes so precious. Life becomes so precious. And the memory just changes into this moment and how precious it is, and how everyone is beautiful and deep and rich and tasty. Excited. So I want to thank you for being and listening and being a part of this. It comes in through everybody. This stuff just kind of comes in through everybody. Then I just like spurt it out, but it comes in, I feel it, and then it just comes out. So it's a cumulative, it's a collaborative. These talks are a collaborative talk. They're not just me blabbing here. A couple of days ago, when I was actually brushing my teeth, so I have these things where I can, it's kind of like dying. I go in and I can see myself, and I can feel, I'm not in my mind, I'm not in this brain anymore. I'm in this other brain, God, so to speak, brain. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, do I want to go, can I go back in to this brain? Do I want to go back into this thinking because it's so limiting? And yet, I have to go back in because it's important for what I do, but it splits me off. And then Shelley knows when it happens, I get really, it gets intensely, like just no bullshit. It's serious, like intensely serious. And so that stays in me for a bit. That kind of intensity. It's like the universe, like, you gotta, no play. Let's just get right to, let's just hit here. And so I get that, and it just comes into me, and I take that on. But I'm normally the playful, play. I like to play. That's my word. I got the play word in the back here. Growing up, I played all the time. So play is like so natural for me. And then this thing I split off this, and it's like, it comes back incredibly, like, it doesn't want to fuck around. It's so different. The other one wants to play. So playing seems to be, you're fucking around a little bit, but this is not. This is like, it's razor sharp, and it has no leeway for anything. It's so precise that it just cuts. And so I get cut like this a lot when that happens, and all of a sudden it shifts me in that way. So like, it's just a just a knowing that rolls in. It's like, okay, it's now.
You were mentioning this thing about how we're reminded all the time that I'm an engineer, or that I'm whatever. And it's one thing to try to eliminate the reminders of what we're not, to try to stop reminding myself that I'm an engineer, and to try to get other people to not remind myself that I'm an engineer. But I'm wondering, rather than just eliminating the reminders of what we're not, if there's some way that we can remind ourselves directly of what we are.
Yes, that's, that actually is the first thing. I didn't really talk much about that part, but thank you for bringing that up. Really, it's remembering these awakening moments in you. When you had something arise that was not your normal way of seeing something. It happens fairly often, actually. It happens so quickly that we don't even realize it happened. And you're seeing these moments where, after you have a meditation, all of a sudden you have an opening, and something happens here, and you all of a sudden like see it completely different. Or a sunset happens, and you see the sunset in a so completely different way. Or like our friend at Toastmasters who went and chased the solar eclipse a few years ago in Oregon, and this guy is the anti-spiritual. He's not spiritual in what he thinks is not spiritual. Then he has this complete epiphany. It's like an enlightened epiphany. And the thing is, we forget these things. So you just kind of sit down and remind yourself that these things are all interconnected. They're tied together. And if you looked at it intensely enough, like if you made a meditation where you just felt the things that you've experienced in the past, they start to bubble up to the front again. And then you start to see, oh my gosh, you know what? I actually have a lot of these qualities of an awakened being, someone who can be in this space constantly, that can be an engineer and also be free of an engineer. And that's something that, like kind of what Sharon says, where, you have this other suffering stuff and you kind of bring that up and kind of free that part. Well, there's this other part where the enlightened part of you that's always being shown. And then we don't, like, either I've had huge ones I completely had forgotten for years. Like, how could I ever forget that one? Because it was so incredible at the moment, and it lasted for a while, and then it kind of fades away. Those are reminders that we have a lot of them. They're just constantly there. It's just showing up, but we're looking left when it comes right past us, but we feel it. And some are big. I mean, Shelley's had some big ones. When she came back from India, she had a pretty big one. But even that, after a while, you kind of forget it. So you're remembering your moments, and then there's a connection to them. There's something that interconnects to them all. They're not separate things. They're not separate, different enlightenments. They're all interconnected. And if you start to see that, you'll start to notice, even just being aware of it, you'll notice when these moments come into you, where all of a sudden you're kind of here. Whoa, yeah, I feel that. Something's different, right? And then you're connected to it, or you look. Some people look and feel and see things. Some people can feel things deeply and go into it. But you're looking at these things and you're saying, okay, that's there. It was short, but then that was there, but that was short. But if you tie them together, you'll start to see there's some length to it, some time in it. There's some actually time that you've spent in it, but you may have not either forgotten of it or, so I always say, you bring a piece of paper and you just sit down and write some enlightenment moments you had, small, big, just kind of, you're trying to break yourself into that kind of memory. And that becomes has its own momentum. Its own momentum. In the moment I awoke, all these things came together, these remembrances came together. I could see them come, boom, 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 boom. But they were like all remembrances, really interesting. But they came all together, simultaneously. But I could see them all. And so there's the things where if you spend your time doing that, then you're bringing your consciousness into that and less into the suffering side. And you see, oh my God, I've had these moments. It's actually quicker to go through that way, because it's already there. You're just you're just putting them together. Does that help, Andy? But I would write them down. I would seriously write them down. And if you get a moment, I'm writing stuff down all the time just to, oh yeah, this would be a good thing to bring in. It's like, oh, there it is. I'm on my bike. There it is. I can feel this place in me, this silent space in me. Good, I'm writing it down. Just, and then you're just reminding yourself that it's actually rising more than you realize. And when you write it down, all of a sudden there's a power to writing it down, really. And we have these phones, you can type it in. I have a notepad thing that I just type in when they come in. And then they kind of expand. You can spend time into it, or I look at it later and it opens itself up later, even. But you're kind of keeping yourself in those enlightened spaces and trying to expand it. Oh, I had that. Oh, but what does that mean? I don't know. Just feel into it. Meditate into it. So you're meditating into your own path. You're basically deepening your path. You're like, oh, here's the path. I get it. Okay, now I need to open that up. And you're just opening that path up. And when you write it down, you start to see it you see it more obviously. So there's a power in the pen, in writing it down. Seriously. And if you can keep it close by, so when it happens, the faster you can respond, write it down the moment it happens, the more it'll stay fresh in you. And then it'll kind of when you look at it, then it'll pop. Like, oh yeah, pop. The memory will just kind of pop and come quicker, and it'll open you up. Like, oh yeah, memory. Reminder, yes. Oh yeah, I saw it, yes. And you're just letting this thing just kind of open yourself up more and more. That really, then your consciousness is looking at that and not looking at the suffering past, looking at the enlightened past. And then when you start looking at the enlightened path shows up in your consciousness more than the suffering path. It's pretty simple, actually.
All right, I'll write some stuff down. I know that as I think back on it, it's far easier for me to remember times where I've received feedback from other people that some way I did or was
yes,
wise or enlightened or woke, but I resonate with what you said earlier about sometimes we have these things that happen that we don't recognize or we don't remember, because I've always had trouble kind of remembering.
Yeah.
Everybody says, oh, well, we've all had these experiences. And a lot of times I say, well, I don't think I have.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, it's just even the smallest ones, even tiny ones, start with that. Like, Shelley's got this book called Tiny Habits. Just do little tiny, even the smallest things. It doesn't have to be like huge, just where you just kind of, oh yeah, oh, that I felt that. Oh, I felt something. Okay, good. I felt something. I'm not sure what it is. I felt something. Okay. It just, again, you're bringing your awareness into this part of you. And if you just do these small little things, it just, all it takes is one little one, and then it could open up to bigger ones. Know that they're always arising, but it's like you're fine tuning your consciousness into this enlightened part of you. And if it hasn't been in that space and it's over in this other space, then it feels like you can't find it. But just be relentlessly. It's kind of like I always tell someone, keep shooting like a basketball player, like, Stephen Curry, or they just keep shooting because they just, it's going to go in. It may miss 20 in a row, but if they stop at 19, that's it. Game over. They don't play. Right? So it's like you just keep shooting, noticing. Oh, they're. You're just kind of keeping your mind open for it. Like not closing it into a memory that I don't think I have it, just kind of keeping this moment available to let that arise. So it's, again, this moment is new, it's free. And let that then be your beacon, so to speak, and then see if that starts to arise. Just small ones first. If it's a struggle. It's there. It's always here, but yeah. But that's true. A lot of people don't feel like they can find those readily. Others more, but you just start with tiny. That opens up the intelligence of this place that we're in. That's where you're touching that intelligence. When you free your intelligence, your limiting intelligence, then it opens up into this genius intelligence that is way more expansive. It's more quantum space than it is base physics, in the most basic way to say that. One's, I drop my pen, it hits the ground. That's something I think I know. But the unknownness of the universe and beyond is something you have to keep in that space you just mentioned. I don't know kind of space. To let that knowing come in. It's a different knowing. And a different force, just a different perception, different place. Just everything's completely, you'll know when you hit it because it's so different than what you can possibly even imagine. It won't come in the same way your thinking comes in. It won't look anything like that. Nothing. That's when you know you're close. When you're freaking out with this intelligence. When it comes in and you start freaking out, then you're getting closer to that intelligence. Because of course you'd have to freak out with that kind of intelligence. So, but it's a good freak out. It's worth the freak out. It really is.
I would love to have a freak out.
Well, Andy's freakouts are so fast that he can't even see them. They're so brilliantly quick. It's incredible. That the self can't catch up. I'm like, what happened? So Andy's got some people are so fast they can't, it's just almost so fast that the self can't even get near it. So yeah, Andy's got some of that for sure. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful, beautiful day.